Hello and welcome back to the Bewarecast. In this video we'll be working our way alphabetically through the species of Dougal Dixon's 1980 speculative biology book After Man, continuing on from where we left off, covering all of the remaining species from the book. But before we get started, I'd like to ask that you please hit the like button, as it really helps with the YouTube algorithm. And if you end up enjoying this video, then please hit the subscribe button and the bell icon to be notified of future uploads. Thank you. The sand flapjack, a fairly large squirrel-like dipodid found in the sandy areas of Asia. It is descended from the jerboa. The physiology of desert animals must tread a narrow path between water conservation and heat regulation. The lack of sweat glands, a water-saving measure, means that less conventional ways must be used to cool the animal in the heat of the day. Usually this is achieved by large ears or similar outgrowths which, crisscrossed by blood vessels, act as radiators to remove the animal's body heat. A structure of this kind is found on the tail of the sand flapjack. Its excess body heat is carried away by the blood to the tail, where it is dissipated into the atmosphere. When pursued, the animal can move at speed, running with its lengthy tail held well out behind as a counterbalance in the manner of its jerboa ancestor. To conserve water, the flapjack even constructs a condensate trap. As part of their courtship ritual, each pair of flapjacks places a pile of stones over the site of the family burrow. These stones, as well as protecting the burrow from the sun's direct rays during the day, provide a large number of cold surfaces on which moisture can condense at night. Predators of the sand flapjack include desert sharks. The shurrack, a large nocturnal temperate woodland-dwelling badger-like white-toothed shrew from Eurasia. It has a size and shape comparable to that of the extinct Eurasian badger. It makes nightly forays through the undergrowth and will take any prey that it chances upon. It has a long snout and broad forepaws with which it digs after burrowing prey animals and excavates its own family nest in soft soil under tree roots. The shurrack, a snow leopard-like musteline mustelid closely related to the pamphret of the northern coniferous forests from the African European mountains. It is one of the deadliest predators found in the African European mountains. Sure-footed over difficult rocky terrain and well camouflaged by its mottled grey fur, it is the growth's principal enemy. The shurracks hunt in packs, surrounding their prey or cornering them in ravines, sharing the kill among themselves. In winter, when the snows come and the herbivores of the mountains, including the growths, move to lower altitudes to find shelter and food, carnivores such as the shurrack closely follow the herds on their seasonal migrations. Skerns, flightless seabirds that have evolved a unique behavioural quirk in response to the problem of incubating eggs in this hostile environment. As well as being a hazardous time for the embryo chicks, the parent birds also run the risk of exposure. The skern has solved the problem by laying its eggs in the warm volcanic sands of the islands and deserting them immediately afterwards. It is able to delay the time of laying until the temperature of the sand is exactly right. When a volcano shows signs of activity, it immediately becomes the scene of frenzied activity. The birds scramble ashore and with the aid of their temperature-sensitive beaks probe the sand for areas with the right conditions for incubation. After laying their eggs 10 to 20 centimeters deep and covering them with sand, they return to the sea, seeing neither their eggs nor their offspring again. The slobber, an arboreal, sloth-like possum that lives in Australian tropical forests. A less energetic tree dweller than the chuckaboo, the slobber can be thought of as a kind of marsupial sloth that spends nearly all of its life hanging upside down from trees and creepers. It is totally blind and subsists entirely on insects that it catches in the flowers of its home creeper by entangling them in long strands of mucus dangled from its mouth. Its large, downturned ears and sensory whiskers alert it to an insect's arrival and tell it when to drop the mucus, which it aims at the flower's scent. As the slobber's hair grows in spiral tufts and is pervaded by a parasitic alga, it is completely camouflaged against the background of creepers, and when totally motionless, can escape the attention of other predators. One deadlier predator that the slobber takes pains to avoid is the hiri-hiri. The snork, a small suid-like bovine bovid from the tropical grasslands of Lemuria. While a Valuphant feeds only on herbs and roots, which it gouges up with its horns, the grasses themselves are eaten by more lightly built, fleet-footed, even-toed ungulates, such as the snork. The snork has a very long head, with its eyes placed near the top, an adaptation that enables it to keep a watch for predators while grazing. The spine-tailed squirrel, a coniferous forest-dwelling sciurine squirrel from Eurasia with colours like a striped skunk. With so many predators, both mammalian and avian, in the coniferous forests, it is not surprising that the smaller mammals should have evolved such a variety of defensive ploys to ensure their survival. The spine-tailed squirrel is an excellent example of their ingenuity. It has a long, broad, flat tail, with quills developed on its underside, which when at rest lie flat over the ground. However, when the animal is alarmed, it throws its tail over its back, and the sudden increase in skin tension erects the quills. This presents an almost impenetrable barrier, and can be turned to deflect an attack from either side. The spitting featherfoot, a strange, strictly herbivorous heteromed from the North American deserts. It has small forelimbs and long hind legs for jumping. The toes are fringed by short, stiff hairs. Its kidneys are highly efficient, recycling the animal's wastewater to the point that its urine is more than twice as concentrated as that of a rodent or similar size living in a humid environment. The featherfoot never drinks water, but obtains all the moisture it needs from plants. It can even eat plants that are poisonous to other animals, and has the ability to excrete toxic substances without their having taken part in any metabolic process. It is a nocturnal animal, but if displaced from its deep burrow by a predator during the heat of the day, it can cool itself by producing copious quantities of saliva and coating the front of its body with foam. It also spits at its foe with deadly accuracy. As the saliva contains most of the excreted poisons from the plants, it is an efficient weapon. Needless to say, this defense mechanism dehydrates the animal very quickly and is therefore only used in dire emergency, and even then only for short periods of time. One of the featherfoot's chief predators is the leaping devil. The strank, a striped tropical grassland-dwelling rabbock from Africa. It has a dazzling pattern of stripes like a zebra. The taller grasses are grazed by vast herds of rabbocks like these. Such patterns make individuals merge into one another so that a distant predator gets only a confused impression of the herd as a whole. It is particularly effective in thorn thickets and areas of scrubby woodland. The strick, a large bipedal cavid from the South American tropical grasslands. It is the most generalized running rodent in the South American grasslands. It looks very much like the grazing kangaroos that once existed in Australia, now developed into such creatures as the giantula. They graze among the long grasses in tightly knit groups that are large enough to ensure that they are always at least 2 or 3 individuals with their heads up, looking around for danger while the rest have their senses buried in the grass. A similar cavid coexisting with the strick is the waka. Because stricks and wakas occupy similar ecological niches, they have, in the course of evolution, developed along similar lines from completely different ancestors. The striga, a bizarre arboreal tiger-like felid with the physics and agility of a primate living in the tropical forests of Africa and Asia. During most of the Cenozoic, the primates have enjoyed a degree of security among the treetops. For even though there were some predators, None was adapted to prey on them specifically, but that was before the striga. This fierce little creature developed about 30 million years ago and spread throughout the rainforests of Africa and Asia, its success hinging on the fact that it was as well adapted to life in the trees as its prey. The striga even adopted the bodily shape of the monkeys on which it fed, a long, slender body, forelimbs that could swing apart to an angle of 180 degrees, a prehensile tail, and opposable fingers and toes that allowed it to grasp the branches. The surf bat, a flightless, semi-aquatic, sea lion-like noctilionoid bat from the seaside beaches of Batavia. The Batavian beaches are home to packs of surf bats that fish in the shallow waters around the coral reefs. Their hind legs, wings and tail flaps have developed into swimming and steering organs, and their bodies have become sleek and streamlined. Their evolution from a flying, though strictly terrestrial walking form, into a semi-aquatic creature is very similar to the evolutionary development of the penguin. The swimming anteater. Land-dwelling animals that have taken to an aquatic mode of life have usually done so initially to escape land-dwelling predators. This is probably why the water ant has taken to building its huge nest on rafts in swamps and quiet backwaters. However, in their new mode of life, the ants are still vulnerable to the swimming anteater, which has evolved in parallel with it. This species of anteater lives solely on water ants, and to reach them undetected, it attacks the nest from below, ripping through the waterproof shell with its clawed paddles. Since below the waterline the nest is made of discrete chambers that can rapidly be made watertight in an emergency, little damage is done to the colony as a whole. The ants drowned in an attack, however, are enough to feed the anteater. The swimming monkey, a tailless semi-aquatic Cercopithecine Old World monkey from the wetlands of tropical forests in Africa. It is descended from the Allen's swamp monkey. It is less well adapted than the coexisting mud gulper, but nevertheless efficient in the water. This creature has developed a frog-like body with webbed hind feet, long clawed fingers for catching bony fish, and a ridge down its back to give it stability in the water. Like the mud gulper, its sensory organs are placed high up on its head. It lives in riverside trees, from which it dives to catch the fish that are its staple diet. The tapimus, a large, long-tusked, omnivorous, tapir-like dasyproctid that lives in the tropical forests of South America. It feeds in open areas of the forest and is the chief prey of the gurath. The termite burrower, a brown, flightless, burrowing pardalate from the undergrowth of the Australian tropical forest. It is as curious a local bird as the hawk boa. This mole-like bird lives entirely underground in termite nests, where it digs nesting chambers with its huge feet and feeds on the termites with its long and sticky tongue. The terror-tail, a timid, squirrel-like murine murid and one of the few mammals living on the Papuas Island chain. The Papuan whistler's wariness of snakes is exploited by the terror-tail. The markings on its tail mimic to a remarkable degree the markings on the head of the Papuan bird snake. When threatened by a predatory bird, or indeed by any other predatory creature, the terror-tail throws its tail into the typical snake-like threat posture and utters a realistic hiss. It makes its escape rapidly into the undergrowth while its enemy is still recovering from the shock. The testodon, an armadillo-like erinacid from the undergrowth of the temperate woodlands of Europe. The testodon is among the insectivorous undergrowth dwellers that have kept to their original lifestyle. It is a descendant of the West European hedgehog. The spines of its ancestor have been replaced by a series of hinged armoured plates, which can roll up and be drawn together to form an impregnable, complete sphere when the animal is threatened. When rolled up tightly, it is almost impossible to grip or penetrate, and even the most determined predator rat finds a meal from this little animal more trouble than it's worth. The tick bird, A small starling-like oxpecker living in the tropical grasslands of the island subcontinent of Lemuria. It has a curious symbiotic relationship with the cleft-back antelope. This relationship is really no more than a strengthening of the symbiosis that had developed between small birds and grazing mammals during the early part of the Cenozoic. Birds on the grassy plains often accompanied the larger mammals, catching the insects disturbed by their hooves or pecking ticks and mites from the hides of the bigger animals themselves. The grazing mammals tolerated this, as the small birds rid them of parasites and also gave warning of approaching danger. In the case of the cleft-back antelope, the relationship has become more intimate, and the animal's back has ceased to be a mere perch and has become a nesting site. Along the animal's back is a pair of ridges, supported by outgrowths from the vertebrae. Between the ridges is a deep cleft lined by stiff hairs that provide an ideal nesting medium for the tick bird. Several families may nest on its back at any one time. Superficial warts on the animal's flanks produce pus at certain times of the year. The pus attracts flies, which lay eggs in the warts. The flies' maggots appear just as the young birds are hatching and provide them with a ready-made source of food. In return, the antelope is supplied with both a constant grooming service and an early warning system that alerts it to approaching predators. The toothed kingfisher, a semi-aquatic tree kingfisher that is frequently found along the watercourses of the tropical forest swamps of Australia. The bill of the kingfisher is strongly serrated with tooth-like points that help it to spear fish. Although it cannot fly as well as its ancestors could, nor can it hover or dive as they did, it has become adept at underwater flight, pursuing its prey in its own medium. After catching a fish, the kingfisher brings it to the surface and gulps it into its throat pouch before taking it back to the nest. As a signal to the opposite sex, the toothed kingfisher's beak changes colour early in the breeding season. The tree drummer, an arboreal white-toothed shrew from the temperate woodlands of Asia. Wood boring is the speciality of the tree drummer genus. These animals, basically shrew-like in form, subsist on a diet of grubs and adult insects, which they gouge out from crevices in the bark. They have masses of sensory bristles on their feet and very large ears, which help them to detect the movement of grubs burrowing in the wood. When a tree drummer finds a grub, it drives its chisel-like teeth into the bark to make a hole big enough to enable it to remove the grub with its trunk-like proboscis. Sometimes the grub becomes skewered on its chisel teeth and needs to be carefully plucked off before being eaten. The tree duck, a whistling duck that lives near the waterways of the tropical forests in Australia, descended from the plumed whistling duck. The tree duck is a water-living creature that almost seems to have changed its mind about its preferred habitat and appears to be in the process of undergoing a change back to the more arboreal lifestyle of its remote ancestors. Although it is still duck-like in appearance, the webs on its feet are now degenerate, and its rounded beak more suitable for feeding on terrestrial insects, lizards and fruit than on water organisms. The tree duck still takes to the water to escape predators, and its young do not venture onto land until they are nearly adults. The tree goose, a goose from the temperate woodlands of Eurasia that lacks the ability to swim and perches on trees in a bizarre way. Being primarily designed for flying, birds have had access to the treetops in a way that few other animals had, and finding that they were safer there than on the ground, they soon became perfectly adapted to this new habitat. As a result, many woodland birds of the posthomic have developed feet with curved opposable toes that are ideal for gripping branches. In one species, the tree goose, these toes have been reduced to 2. They are permanently curved and enable the bird to hang upside down without effort. Because of the bird's size and weight, this attitude is much easier to maintain over long periods than an upright stance, and it has taken to spending long periods roosting in this position. The trevel, a small arboreal rodent from the coniferous forests of Eurasia. Other than the chiselhead, no small rodent found in the coniferous forest is quite so destructive. Most live on shoots, bark, and the seeds found in cones. Many are ground dwellers and feed from the cones where they fall. Others are lightly built and agile enough to scramble along the branches to where the cones are actually growing. The treval is unusual in having a prehensile tail. Too heavy to reach the cones growing from the slenderest branches, it feeds on them instead by hanging by its tail from a sturdy neighbouring branch and reaching out with its front paws. Like other rodents of this general size, it gathers more than is necessary for its immediate needs and stores the rest for the lean winter months. Its hibernation nest is a long, drooping structure woven together from grass, strips of bark, and pine needles. Built hanging from the end of a branch, it is large enough to accommodate the animal together with sufficient food to see it through the winter. The trovamp, a small, agile, parasitic, blood-sucking shrew from the forest floor of African tropical forests. One of the smaller mammals of the African tropical forest, the trovamp is a parasite which sucks the blood of larger mammals. The trovamp is built rather like a typical sauricomorph or one of the smaller prosimian primates. It is very agile, climbing about, usually in packs, among the trunk and the branches of the shrubs. The trovamp is a prodigious jumper and can leap 3 meters from a branch to bury its needle-like jaws into the hide of a passing larger animal. Its protruding canine teeth act as barbs and prevent it from being dislodged from its host until it is finished feeding. As many as 10 trovamps may parasitize one host and will remain feeding until the host animal is severely weakened. The true teal, a small, nocturnal, temperate, woodland-dwelling white-toothed shrew from Asia that provides food for nocturnal birds of prey. It is closely related to the arboreal, diurnal, chisel-toothed tree drummer. The incisors of both the upper and lower jaws of this animal are extended forward to form a structure like a bird's beak, which acts as a probe to catch earthworms and burrowing insects in soft earth and leaf litter. The true teal is completely blind and retains no vestiges of eyes. It is, however, equipped with a large number of sensory whiskers and extremely acute hearing. Its ears, which are enormous for the size of its body, can be rolled into trumpets by a unique set of muscles located at their base and then pressed to the ground to listen for sounds of burrowing. The true teal has an overall length of about 12 centimeters. Its ears are about 2.5 centimeters long. The termi, an almost anteater-like suine suid from the forest floor of African tropical forests. Feeding principally on ubiquitous termites, the termi is one of the few large mammals found on the African rainforest floor. A close relative is the xeranda. It is descended from the giant forest hogs that were once common in this environment. In the termi, the tusks of the upper jaw are projected forwards, elongating the snout still further, and have turned outwards to produce strong pick-like instruments with which it digs into termite mounds. The lower jaw has lost all its teeth and musculature, and the mouth has diminished to a tiny hole through which sticks out its ribbon-like tongue to gather termites. The tusked mole, a bizarre talpine talpid from the undergrowth of temperate woodlands in Europe, descended from the European mole. Looking very much like a mole from 50 million years before, it leads a burrowing existence and has adopted the streamlined shape, velvety fur and spade-like feet of its distant cousin. However, this is where the resemblance stops. It has 2 huge tusks extending from its jaws and a paddle-shaped tail. As it burrows, the animal pushes forward with its feet in a rolling motion so that its tusks ream out in the soil in front of it. The loose soil is pushed back by the feet and compacted to the tunnel walls by its tail. As well as eating earthworms and other burrowing invertebrates, it also preys on small, surface-living fellow vertebrates, especially mice, voles, and lizards. The ubiquitous termite, a tropical forest floor-dwelling termite from Africa. The valuphant, a large cattle-like bovine bovid from the tropical grasslands of Lemuria. It is the largest even-toed ungulate in Lemuria. It is a massive animal, some 5 meters long, with a squat rounded body and massive legs, resembling those of the gigantelopes to which it is distantly related. Its most distinctive feature is the tall ridge running down its back and neck. The ridge is supported by the neural spines of the vertebrae and may be of use in regulating the animal's temperature. The valuphant feeds only on herbs and roots, which it gouges up with its horns. The grasses themselves are eaten by more lightly built, fleet-footed, even-toed ungulates, such as the snork. The vortex, a huge baleen whale-like pelagornid from the waters around Antarctica. In contrast with the vast Antarctic continent, which in the posthomic supports life only around the edges, the surrounding Southern Ocean teems with life. Among its most notable inhabitants is the vortex, the largest animal found anywhere in the world, at 30 tons and over 12 meters in overall length, including its 2.75 meter beak. Resembling many of the sea creatures of the past, it has a long, tapering, neckless body, a powerful paddle-shaped tail, and long stabilizing flipper wings, an ideal arrangement for efficient movement through water. The vortex is in fact descended from the penguins, which, although they were birds, had long since lost the power of flight and were totally adapted to a semi-aquatic lifestyle, excepting for one thing: they always had to come on shore to lay their eggs. This remained so until, shortly after the extinction of the whales, one species of penguin developed the ability to retain its single egg internally until it was ready to hatch, and gave birth to live young in the open ocean, making it the first ovoviviparous bird. Freed of the necessity to come ashore, this species became completely marine and ultimately gave rise to a completely new order of marine birds, the pelagornids, of which the smaller porpin is the commonest surviving example. Although a plankton eater and very much larger, the vortex is also a member of the pelagornid order. Its beak has developed into a large plankton sieve, which consists of a very fine mesh of bone plates instead of coalesced hair, as in the case of the whale's baleen plates. The waka, a large, somewhat ratite-like creature with no front limbs, native to the South American tropical grasslands. It is the most specialized member of the posthomic South American plains-dwelling rodents, and perhaps the most highly adapted running animal in the world. Because of its bipedal stance, its forelimbs have become less important, and are now completely atrophied. Its globular body and long hind legs support an equally long neck and tail, which balance one another, maintaining the animal's center of gravity over its hips. These features give the creature a clear view of the surrounding countryside. Even when the waka is grazing in long grass, its eyes are placed high enough on its elongated head for it to see the approach of a predator. Because strix and wakas occupy similar ecological niches, they have, in the course of evolution, developed along similar lines from completely different ancestors. The watu, a large spotted rabbuck from the African tropical grasslands. It carries large angular blotches similar to those once possessed by the giraffe. The taller grasses are grazed by vast herds of rabbucks like these. Such patterns make individuals merge into one another so that a distant predator gets only a confused impression of the herd as a whole. It is particularly effective in thorn thickets and areas of scrubby woodland. The woolly gigantelope, a northern tundra-dwelling migratory gigantelope from the tundra of the northern continent, similar to a woolly mammoth. For many large animals, the tundra is only habitable during the summer months, and in winter they migrate southwards into the coniferous forests where conditions are less austere. The largest of these animals is the woolly gigantelope. It differs from equatorial gigantelopes mainly in size and in the possession of a large, fatty hump which provides it with nourishment during the hungry winter months. It has a long, shaggy winter coat and broad hooves which prevent it from sinking into soft snow. It uses its enormous horns as snow ploughs to expose the mosses, lichens and herbaceous plants on which it feeds. Its eyes are small to avoid being frostbitten, and its nostrils are bordered by blood vessels that warm the air before it reaches the lungs. In early summer, the woolly gigantelope loses its shaggy coat and takes on a much sleeker appearance. The hump, which sustained it through the winter months, is now entirely depleted, and it spends much of the time eating to rebuild its energy store for the long trek back south in the autumn. Because of the woolly gigantelope's size, 3 meters at the shoulder without the hump and 7.5 tons in weight, there are very few predators powerful enough to threaten it. Its only real enemy is the bardalot. The Zoranda. A large elephant-like suine suid with a somewhat okapi-like coloration to it, living in the tropical forests of Africa. It comes from the same ancestral stock as the coexisting termi, that being the giant forest hog. This large, strictly herbivorous suid lives on the sparse herbs and shrubs found in less dense areas of the forest floor. Its 1.5 meter long trunk, developed from a snout similar to the trunk of the ancient elephant, enables the Zoranda to reach leafy branches 4 meters above the ground, where it can snip branches and vines from the trees by the scissor action of its upper and lower tusks. Despite its long nose, the Zoranda has little sense of smell. Like other mammals on the forest floor, the lack of wind and general circulation among the dense trees means that scents do not travel far. Relying on its keen hearing to warn it of the approach of an enemy, it takes off into the thicker parts of the forest at the arrival of a predator, squeezing its narrow body between the tree trunks and remaining motionless, camouflaged by its stripes and dark body colour. It measures about 2.3 meters high at the shoulder and weighs 1 ton. Zorandas live in small herds of up to 8 in number. Each herd usually contains only 1 adult male. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, then please hit the like button to be notified of future uploads. And also, please don't forget to leave a comment and share this video with anyone who you feel would find it interesting. I'd also like to thank my generous channel members and patrons who can be seen here. This has been the Bewarecast, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care.